So we're back in here with part two of Marching Minds with Bonds, Beats and Wellbeing, this special episode of the Made to Pray podcast that we're doing for the Northern Ireland Mental Health Arts Festival. You'll have just heard from three of our guests in the first part, and I'm now joined by three new band members or people who are associated with the band scene in some shape or form. And I'm just going to ask each of them to introduce themselves. I'll start with this gorgeous person next to me, Derek. If you just tell us who you are, what band you're involved in, and what made you get involved with this particular podcast.
Hi, my name's Derek Moore. I'm from Londonderry. I play with the William King Memorial Flute Band, but I play with quite a few bands around. One of those boys that would march with anybody if I could get the chance. I played a brass band, a jazz band and stuff like that there. I was a builder most of my life. I was talked into taking on a job, probably the first paid job in Northern Ireland to look at bands in 2013. And I took over the coordinator of Londonderry bands for him. Andrew touched on that a wee bit. Now moved on to Peace Impact programme in the community.
All right, and so obviously this idea of the positive impact of bonds is still very important to you in the work that you do now, yeah?
But I think everything that promotes a band that you brought up earlier, such as the negative publicity, nobody looks at the strength and the positive situation that bands can create, the amount of people that they can deal with. Not only the amount of people in the bands, but the amount of people around the band scene, families and all. So I think it's very, very important for us to get this kind of positive message out all the time.
Brilliant, good stuff. Sarah, what about you?
My name's Sarah Bunting. So my connection with the band scene, I suppose, started when I was 15, and I joined the colour party for Ballyhalbert Flute Band. And then about 7 years ago, I had an attempt at playing the accordion with the Lord Carson in East Belfast. But more recently, and the reason I'm involved tonight is I'm one of the co-founders of the Belfast Bands Forum. So have been involved with a lot of training around mental health and trying to show the positive side of marching bands across Belfast.
Brilliant, appreciate that, thank you. And Graeme, last but not least, Graeme, how you doing?
Graeme Stevenson. I'm with the Portadown Defenders Flute Band. So I've been in the band from a young age, 20 odd years now, and part of the leadership of the band, and here to talk about the Fit to March programme that we done pioneered with Alternatives recently.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, it'd be great to get sharing a wee bit about that as well. So great to have you on. Derek, we're going to start with you, not just because you're the oldest, but well, you were talking a wee bit before we went live again in this particular hub about a particular aspect of bonds that has contributed to the idea of mental health from way back. It's something you just kind of started thinking about. Tell us a wee bit about what you were sharing.
Well, I think one of the big problems we do have, and especially people of my age, I didn't actually realise that much about mental health most of my life. It's a sort of new phenomenon that has appeared this past few years. And I suppose when I got to think about it, looking back, if I look back to the formation of the band in 1972, in Londonderry, it was a time of huge tension, and we lived on the west bank of the Foyle, and I'm still based over there, and the William King Memorial is still based over there. But a lot of communities were being broken up. People were being moved out of their homes through issues in the city, through terrorism and stuff like that there. And people were spread all over the outskirts of London, and they were moved out to, some people moved, even though they only moved 3 miles out the road, it was as if they were in a foreign land, no buses, no nothing. And I suppose thinking around the aspect, one of the things that created those new communities was the fact that some people could play musical instruments and they formed bands in those areas. Now that not only pulled the younger people together, that got their parents, they mixed with other people as well, and it sort of, it helped to foster those communities who had been displaced from where they'd lived all their lives. Now that whole process unfortunately took a full generation before communities were able to thrive again on the outskirts of London. It left us way behind in community development stuff and all that there, and a situation where we have never really caught up. But just thinking about all this here, it was the strength of young people getting together in bands, and a lot of it was about protest and all, 1970s and stuff like that there. It was a bit of a different world, 50 years further on, you know, we're on about music and stuff like that there, but at that time it was about identity, it was about communication, and you know, it was about creating new communities.
Yeah.
And you know, I think like looking back on it, you realise that the bands actually pulled the new communities together and actually probably, you know,
Galvanised
it galvanised that, but it took away the loss of what they had done all their lives, especially in their parents and all, where they got a bit of pride in their community and the band, and new communities thrive from that.
Yeah, I think because whatever you were sharing about, I don't want, like, I never would have thought of that as a consequence of bands forming was that they were actually instrumental in communities becoming more cohesive again at a time of great kind of, you know, upheaval in regards to what was going on in terms of the political situation, having to move about and stuff, and that the bands become a sense of cohesion, unity, solidarity as in a sense. And you know, and building that kind of resilience and needing to strengthen your identity, because it was a time whenever identity was feeling like it was under attack, it was being threatened and stuff, and the bonds step in and have a major impact on it. There definitely should be some study work done on it, I think.
Right. Well, I mean, it, you know, as I say, and a lot of it within the community was, you know, like bands at that time was all about, you know, gathering up the money and collecting it to get going. Like it's not a cheap way of life. You know, so those communities were contributing, you know, and they felt a sense of, as has been mentioned earlier on, of belonging, you know, of identity and stuff like that. So, as I say, this has all kind of brought that thinking back. And I think one of the big things that we do lose is we don't actually realise until things like this were happening what bands were like. You know, I mean, a year or two back we were thinking, we weren't really in bands. We were actually social workers at times. You know, we looked out for younger people who you knew came from difficult homes, maybe addiction problems and stuff like that. And the band allowed, as Andrew said earlier, for all of that. You know, no one was left out because of money. No one was left out because of what they didn't have. When they were in the band, they had something.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. So it is. And in terms of now, I know you've you started to notice, you know, this becoming more to the fore now. How have you started? Have you seen that up in terms of Londonderry? How bands have started to maybe take this a wee bit more seriously in terms of the mental health side of things?
I think I spoke at Sarah's event there recently, and I, you know, one of the first things I know was a throwaway comment. I said, you know, for Belfast bands, what took you so long? You know, because I think that we kind of found, and for us it was through necessity. You know, we live in an area where we are a huge minority, so you know, Belfast's not the same as us. We do realise that and stuff like that there. But I think what we discovered was that there's a strength in the band's community, and that strength can be used for really, really positive stuff. Now there is some negative stuff there, so there's no sense us all avoiding that there. But the thing about it is, there's so much more positive stuff there. And it's doing so much good for society. You know, there's, you know, we don't highlight the charity work, we don't highlight the other stuff, you know, we don't highlight the camaraderie, and we're doing things that we don't really know what we're doing, as Ian and Derek brought up there. You know, we're not counsellors, but we kind of know, you know, you deal with certain people you have to walk on eggshells with, certain people you can dictate to, certain people you can, you know, there's it kind of comes natural being a band, and it comes through music, and it comes through all that other stuff that goes along with it.
Yeah, brilliant. Good stuff. We'll come back and talk to you about some other stuff that we read. Graeme, I want to talk to you, and I want to talk to you about the Fit the March program that the band was involved in. Fit the March is not something that's, I suppose, unique to alternatives in your band. The first time I came across that term was Lagan Valley, used this idea of, because I think whenever I was doing the article for Last Night a Flute Band Saved My Life, I've been talking to Big Kent Tate, and he had mentioned that they were running this thing that they called it in the offside, like pre-season training, and they called it Fit the March, and I kind of clocked that as that's a great title for a program. And I think there's been a few other people. I think one of the bands up in Londonderry, there might have been a steps challenge at one point that was linked to this idea of Fit the March, and then we did a program together that kind of formalised that. Talk to us a wee bit about how the program came about in regards to engaging your band specifically, and what happened on the program, and what that experience was like for the membership, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. So basically, we had that initial conversation, the idea come up, we talked about how there was a bit of a gap where we took a break over the winter. I think somebody touched on it earlier that sometimes you can sort of become a wee bit distant over the winter months. You're less active, you see less of each other and stuff like that. So we thought, right, there's a bit of a need here. We developed and we talked through doing something basically to fill that winter months gap from the season ends till the season starts again. And obviously we stuck with the title Fit to March. We felt it really fitted with what we wanted to do. And the three key themes that we come up with was being physically fit, mentally fit and culturally fit. And we built the programme, obviously with yourselves and ABC Alternatives, around fitting those key, everything had to fit within those three pillars.
Yeah. What did that actually look like? So talk us through some of the activity aspect that come on, because there were some funny moments throughout that in regards to one of the ones that I kind of mentioned at the talk on Friday. There was watching the band form up with with those resistance bands on, marking time and doing all these type of acts. So talk through what some of the activities that the band got up to as a result of it.
Yeah, so basically the physical aspect of the programme brought in some resistance band training, some circuits. It was mainly built around going out on walks. There was also, we introduced carrying the Bergen, the army Bergen, the weighted, and that sort of, there's a bit of crack with it as well. That was mainly the physical, and then we started a Strava group, and then it got quite competitive, and it sort of spurred everybody on. There was different aspects of the physical side of it, and that was really just about clocking up, getting people active, getting them out. But it's funny how that actually had as much impact on the mental side of things as it did the physical. Yeah. As we get into the programme, that all become very clear. On the mental side of things, then it was, we done the safe talk training. Obviously on the walks, what we done on the walks and some of the discussions we had, and obviously the restorative, we were introduced to restorative circles that you're used to with your work, and it just blown everybody away. It just opened everybody's minds. It was amazing.
What was it like? See, whenever we got used to, because initially we did, I remember when we did the first night, we did like a wee information night with you, and then the first time we actually met, we ended up putting you in a circle and stuff like that there. Talk about what was that like? Because I know for some there was a few raised eyebrows and we're passing the talking piece around and all this kind of stuff, but it actually became something that people look forward to. Yeah, absolutely. At the start, I think I even thought there's some of the guys won't pick to this. I don't know how this is going to go down. Very quickly, it shocked even me just how people responded to it and how they took to it, how open it became, how safe an environment it came. You know, when it has the restorative circle practice and doing that. So basically, for anybody, we started off a session with everybody just got into a huge circle in the room. Everybody sat in a circle. There was a talking piece, and you basically done a check-in. And we started off very simple, so you rated yourself 1 to 10, how you felt starting off the session. And you'd have got guys who maybe were saying, yeah, I'm about 7 or 8, or some guys maybe on a 9 or 10. I've had a great day I was off today, good weather, got a lot done. Other guys were maybe, I'm about a 2 or 3, had a tough day, work was tough today. Maybe the young people were saying, no, I didn't have a good day in school today, this happened or that happened. And everybody became very honest, and it became very, you know, and then we obviously done a checkout circle, which was done at the end of every session. And again, you were asked again on a score of 1 to 10, how do you feel now? And I think it goes back to what you said earlier. Near not anybody who was feeling sort of down on the lower end of the scale, see after being involved in those activities and the crack and having the social conversations, were saying, I'm so glad I came tonight. I didn't even want to bother leaving the house earlier on. I couldn't be bothered. I thought there's nothing worse. I'm just going to give it a miss. I am so glad I come out of the house and come to this. Yeah. It's lifted me up. You know, when we have guys, older guys, you know, who were maybe, you know, had a lot of stress on at work and stuff like that, who opened up and said, you know, I am so glad I come this tonight. This is what I needed. To leave my phone. I've had a torturous day in work. Could not think of anything worse. I just wanted to bin this tonight. Didn't even want to come. And he says, I left the phone in the car. And the last couple of hours is just, I feel like a new man. I'm so glad I come. I just needed that, just needed to clear. And you had young people as well, who maybe sort of weren't feeling great, you know, school and stuff like that. And then to hear them at the end of the session say how much improved they felt and giving themselves sort of higher
out of that time was just amazing. It felt brilliant every week.
What else did come out? Because there was a bit of an art project and stuff come out. So it was kind of one of these programs that in 12 weeks kind of checked a heck of a lot of boxes in regards to activities. But you had an art project and stuff that came out of this as well, didn't you?
We did. So we ended up basically doing a bit of an art project. We done a band mural. So as part of being the physical fit aspect of it, the mental health side of it, the cultural, being culturally fit, and that was about everybody being aware of who they are, where they're from, their history, their identity, and being confident in that, and being able, to stand on that. And out of that process, then obviously went back to the band's roots, where we're from, where we're formed, speaking to ex-members and people who formed the band and everything, and then that led us doing basically a band mural just up the street in the housing estate from where the band was formed and the hall. So
yeah, what would you say the impact of this program has been on the band? Because some of the feedback that we got at the end of this was outstanding. And I wasn't able to make the celebration event, but I know you've had a great time just reflecting on the impact of the program on the band.
It's huge. It can't be overstated. It's changed our outlook, even how we look at the band. It's opened our eyes and our mind to what the band's far bigger than just the band. It has so many other aspects to it. We are now looking at people and the well-being of people and how the role that the band plays in people's well-being, and looking at how we can help to bring that into other aspects of their life, even outside of just the Monday night practice, weekend parading and stuff like that. It's even the gaps in between. So we still would use, and the idea of the circles and stuff like that, we try and use that. It's still talked about. We're working, we've got young people. We actually done an age profiling of the band at the start of the year, before we got back together, and I think we've about around 80, it's just shy of 80 in the band, including all the young leaders. 36 or 37 of them are 18 and under.
Right, okay.
And then another 34 or something is between 18 and 35. And we're sort of breaking it down. And then we're working with, we started to, a holistic sort of approach. So, we're sort of looking at where the band's position is in the community, and then working with the schools and, religious settings and others, and realising that we have a massive role to play and place in this community with all these people and the young people. We're working with young people now, and teachers, with parents and stuff who'd say to us, we struggle in school. Somebody said earlier, you come to the band, doesn't matter your background. You can be rich, poor, you can be academic, you can be not, you can be big or small. The band's a leveler. You're just, everybody comes in and they're treated the same. It doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah.
And but we're trying to use the band now as a for good use, in terms of turning people's, even they're maybe struggling in school for different reasons, and they maybe behavioural issues or struggling with whatever, and emotional problems and stuff, but they live for the band, and the headmasters and the principals and the teachers and the parents will say you can't get him to do anything. All he cares about is the band. That's all he looks forward to do. It's the only thing he can hang out, threaten him with, is the band. And we say, well, right, let's turn that. Let's then use the band to try and improve his well-being in life. And the feedback we're getting from the school principals and the teachers and the parents and stuff that we're trying to engage with just in a community setting and through alternatives and the work alternatives do is immense. They can't believe it. And where barriers were maybe up in a lot of places where they wouldn't have entertained a loyalist flute band, and with all the negatives and the stereotypes and stuff come with it, those barriers are starting to come down because they're seeing the benefits that it brings to the community. And
did you? That's obviously an unforeseen, bonus that's come out, and nobody would have seen that coming out of this program and stuff like that. Because one of the things that I found really was, like you were saying, just how quickly the guys in the band opened up. In terms of, I remember 1 week there was someone talking about. I just come out of the most simple question. He started talking about his home life. One of the guys, I'll not go into any details in regards to that, but he was talking about that. And then I remember being on. I remember being on one of the walks, and one of the guys had got a pretty dire diagnosis in the band during the time that the program was
right in the middle of it.
Right in the middle of
impact.
Yeah.
And only before the program itself actually then helped the guys in the band deal with his diagnosis and his treatment and everything
Yeah,
that comes
because
with
it was
that.
all one of those walks. I ended up being paired up with the
Yeah.
guy on one of the walks, and I was going, so what's going on in your life? And he's like, oh, well, this just happened, and I just like, oh my God, right, okay.
Yeah.
But one, it was like that he felt comfortable enough in that moment to share what he was going through, which I thought was amazing, and then how the band rallied round. Regards to, because I know it wasn't the first time that this had happened to him. It would happened to him previously before in terms of what, but this was, it was heightened, I think, because the program was going on.
That's it. And obviously the young people, I think it was remarked upon even in the circles and stuff. As you say, it amazed me how it became a safe environment for people to open up. As you said, people started talking about maybe home life, and there was relationship issues, there was people with addiction issues, there was people with all sorts of medical, those sort of diagnosis and stuff, and how you deal with all that. There was one of the lads, two lads, or brothers, who lost their mother just before the program started and stuff, and they opened up even in the group. And I think with young people in the group that even Pete and everybody was saying, like, they couldn't believe, they felt safe and comfortable enough to take the talking piece in a room full of guys and stand and talk and say their bit and be open and honest about how they felt. So that's the sort of safe environment that the bands give people.
So if there were bands out there that had the opportunity to take part in a Fit the March program, I'm taking it you would recommend that they do it.
Absolutely. There's nothing to lose from it. You're only ever going to gain. It was the best thing we ever done, and absolutely.
Brilliant. So shameless plug time here. I've been able to get some money from Belfast City Council to run another version of this program. So if there's any bands out there, and maybe sir, you might want to pop this across to the Belfast bands, because it'll have to be a Belfast band that takes part in it. We'd love to have a band involved in that and run one of these 12-week programs. I definitely think it's something we should be doing more of across the province. So, Sarah, let's come to you then, and we'll talk to you a bit about what impact do you see the forum having on mental health? Because obviously the bands contribute to that in terms of their practice, whatever else. But what way do you see the Belfast Bands Forum being able to impact positively on mental health?
I think there's a couple of different levels to it where the bands forum can help. So we've actually had our discussions already around the forum taking part with the Fit to March with Brian over in South Belfast.
Okay,
we had those discussions around that because Ken Tate, as you said, he's one of the members there, and he was really positive about the impact that can have. So we're having those discussions. We delivered spot training with a group of 40 guys from bands across Belfast, and I think it's just making that safe space where they can come together and have that training and not have any stigma there, and feel free to be able to go back to their bands and share that information, and hopefully talk more people into coming along the next time we do that. But I think there's also a separate piece to that around the impact of social media on bands and those who are in bands, because it is very negative whenever you look at marching bands. All you see in the news and on social media generally is the negative side of what can happen at parades, and there's so much beyond that is never talked about, and a lot of bands are getting better at using their social media to show that positive side, but a lot of them don't. And it is about trying to spread that awareness of the positive sides around the teaching the kids and raising funds for charities, different things like that I think that the forum can really help with. And Derek has been great. Derek has came along to our meetings and has been engaging with us around some of those programs about going into schools and getting the kids involved there as well. So I think the forum can bring together all the things that the bands are already doing themselves and just open it out to a wider audience.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely one of the key things, that the bands getting themselves in a place where they can use language to positively promote what they do in a way that other people will get, and I think it's about finding those other models that you can kind of attach onto. Like I was talking about, at the start of this podcast, Take Five's another one that you can potentially be using. Another one that I've used on a regular basis has been the model for effective practice in youth work, and how bands contribute in a similar way to the lives of young people that they engage with. Or essentially, bands and to a large degree are almost like a voluntary youth service at times, with some of the bands and the amount of young people that's involved with them, and unpaid people are coming in there working with these kids, teaching them how to play an instrument, etc., and utilizing skills that people have went to university for, getting degrees for. These guys are just running about, week in, week out, just doing that naturally because that's what they've done week in, week out and stuff. One of the things that I did want to talk about in regards to this was about the future and what does in terms of the band scene, how can it look? How can we develop a more positive future for the band scene in regards to this idea of mental health? So I'm going to open that up to everyone. I know there's a few of the guys out and who were in the previous thing and maybe got some thoughts on this too. But if we were looking at this, how do we, build this into the future of the band scene in terms of how do we do that? What are some of the ways? What does that look like, do you think?
Well, I think one of the biggest issues you have, and you nearly touched on it there, was this notion of volunteerism. Volunteerism in itself is great, but it can only go so far. And I think if we take our experience up in Londonderry, the thing that has driven our whole organisation forward has been people in paid positions. We likened the band scene to the GAA earlier, but we're not like the GAA because they can access and control a lot of funding and stuff like that there, and they can control they can have people in place to do things that volunteers can only do up to a point. So I think going forward, what we really need to do is utilise the things that are there. Utilise the Arts Council, utilise all this stuff. The new Culture Act that's coming in. We really need to nearly impose on our politicians that they need to start looking at a bigger picture. We've discussed a lot of things that people won't even associate with bands tonight. Yeah. And we really need to be looking at models of good practice, and we need to be looking at having really good people. I mean, I only met some of these people tonight and I'm really, really impressed. There is good people out there. They can really, really help the band scene, but they can't do it for nothing and they can't do it forever.
Okay, yeah, brilliant. Thank you. I concur 100%. I think it would be part of that whole idea of upskilling guys within the band within the band scene. And giving us the capacity to actually engage wider than that. There, and I think that's really important. Sir, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it is winding that out because there's a lot of guys in the bands who've been doing it for a long time, and they know how to do that. They know how to engage with the kids, and even wider issues that we'll be seeing across the city. Kids building bonfires when there's issues there. It's usually people within the bands that can reach out, and help sort out any issues that there is there. So I think it is around trying to ensure that there is that fair funding. And that was part of the reason that I got involved with the Bands Forum and helped to set it up. Seeing that from the other side, and I'm really glad to hear you got funding from Belfast City Council for the Fit to March programme because there hasn't been fair funding there in the past because of the stigma that comes with marching bands. So I think it is really important to change that view for people, and there is people willing to listen if we can change that view of what the marching band scene is and make it a level playing field and change it from just volunteer to having people in paid positions that can lead the way forward. I think it's really important. Yeah,
brilliant. Graeme, what about yourself? What are your kind of thoughts here?
Yeah, just to concur really with what's been said. I think there's fantastic work being done out there. It'll be initiatives like this. It'll be the work that's being done already, but as it's already been said, you can only take it so far in a volunteer capacity. People only can do so much in their own free time around every other commitment that they have. So it's proper support, proper funding, and just keep talking about it. And Light of Foot was obviously, for me, I was talking to the guys in the interval there, was like the pioneering for me was the thing that really started the conversation of bands. And I mean, there is so much out there, but it needs proper support, proper backing and assistance.
Yeah, and I think that can't be understated in a sense, because what I think is, whenever you have been rejected so many times in regards to, because it's not that bonds aren't looking for funding. We don't want to make this into a funding debate, but I think that does have an impact on how bonds see themselves and how they choose to engage with other services around about it. When you're constantly being knocked back and told that this funding isn't for you, or whenever I look at the disparity in regards to even, and I don't mind saying this, at the Arts Council's instrument fund, whoopie do, folks. Do you know what I mean? Great. There's actually, and they extended it a couple of times this year, and that's fantastic. I think it's great. But in the whole, the amount of the money in that pot is the same amount of money that the Arts Council gives to 10 individual people for individual artist awards. And that pot is to service 35,000 people in bonds across the city. I just think in terms of that, for me, is a disparity. It almost heaps a sense of shame and we're not worthy of anything on the bond scene. And it's just not true. And it really, as you can probably tell, it rails me a wee bit. And whenever, when I experience that in regards to, well, hey, you know what? We're doing a hell of a lot of great work with a lot of people across this province. We're not doing it to get the recognition, but it would be nice to bloody have it in regards to, funding some of the work that we're doing here. And, so I get that that's a two-edged thing. In terms of we need the upper standards as well. That's massive. Let's be constituted. Let's make sure we're, doing things. Let's get our insurance things sorted, our policies and stuff sorted, that we're doing things on a level that's on par with what's expected with community work.
I think that's the key, Glenn. It's not about asking for money. It's about having a plan, what you're going to do with the money, how you're going to improve yourself, how you want people like the Arts Council and all to check on improvement. Because I feel that sometimes you get money from Arts Council, Ulster Scots, and that's it. They don't look to see if you've made an improvement.
Yeah.
I think we need to do, and we really need good plans in place. Spade ready for projects that we're looking for.
Exactly.
A lot of stuff that was spoken about tonight, can be spade ready quite simply. And there's a lot of good practice stuff out there. I'm not just saying about ourselves, but I mean, we've had 10 or 11 years now to develop good practice. It's there for everybody to take if they want it.
And it's about being serious about tracking the results too, I think, as well, about having something to present to people to say, listen, this is what happened. We've all this anecdotal evidence, from the likes of Fit the March and other things and stuff. But like Andrew was talking about earlier, about having hard data to kind of drill down into and say, listen, here's the impact that's being made. Let's do something about it.
I think when we spoke about the schools earlier on, a few years ago, the headmaster who took over a control school in our city, it wasn't achieving the best thing, but he came to the bands forum and he says, all I really want you to do is tell the pupils in my school who are in your bands, come to the school the same as they go to the band, be proud of their uniforms and have them neat and tidy, listen to their teachers, and respect them the way they respect the bands, the teachers in the band, and learn the stuff the way they learn their music for the street.
Yeah.
And I can't ask no more.
And that's having an impact.
And that's having an impact there anyway.
Happy days. So in regards to that, because I know what I'm going to do, when I open this up for some questions and stuff, I don't know whether you maybe have some in regards to that for all of the people who've been on the panel. But one of the things I'm conscious, Ian, you were talking to me about some stuff that you were talking about. One of the things that we mentioned about in regards, especially in regards to the idea of self-esteem and pride and our mental health and stuff, was around. I told the story about my uniform. Whenever I first joined a band, right, I have a wee touch of OCD about certain things, right. But one thing that I always had OCD about was my band uniform. It always had to be one in pristine condition. The shoes had to be absolutely sparkling. But the other thing, and this is what was weird, see my wardrobe, nothing else was allowed to touch my uniform. There was no other clothes. They could see if I went in and someone had moved a hanger and something had touched my band jacket, I would have had a fit. Like there was that was how much it meant to me in regards to this uniform means so much to me. The fact that whenever I put it on, the sense of pride, the sense of belonging that comes with it, because something about putting on a uniform for me makes my shoulders go back a wee bit, makes me walk a wee bit taller, makes me feel a wee bit better about myself. And somebody was joking with me about, not being out with the band for quite some time, and this year has been mad for me in regards to I only got out for the first time with the band there on Saturday night, and I have to say the feeling that I had walking around with the band was just like, thank God I have finally got to be out on a parade, because here's me on all these podcasts and going to these events and talking about bands, and I haven't even walked this year, do you know what I mean? But one of the things that we have noticed a lot is bands that aren't walking in uniform. They're either turning up the parades and they're in civvies, and it may be that their uniform, they're waiting on a uniform and stuff, but there's something about that uniformity of being dressed the same, walking in a particular fashion, that develops a sense of pride in yourself and a sense of pride in your band and stuff. And I think it's something we need to definitely hold on to and not lose the standard there. That's me preaching from my own kind of pedestal. And then the other thing is, for me, we were talking about this as well, Ian, was some of the competitive elements in parades probably needs to go a wee bit too, because one of the things that you have is you've got lots of kids potentially who have been learning an instrument, they head out onto a competition, they win nothing. And they take that really, really personally in regards to, well, were we crap? What was going on? And I think we can definitely have parades. I think there's a place for competition still, but I don't know whether it's there. But I think it's something we need to look at. I think it's something we can collectively look at together as well. So, folks, I really appreciate your input. We're going to open up for some questions if there is any, or maybe even some comments and stuff. If there's not, that means I can get cleaning up a wee bit earlier. But if there are some questions that you want to pose to anybody who's been speaking, please raise your hand. Or I was going to say speak now, forever hold your peace, but here, that may trigger somebody, because I said divorce was the best thing ever happened to me. So, all right, and. Anybody got any questions for the guys on the panel, or anybody that's spoken? Anything you'd want to find out about? No?
Can I just say one thing? Just thank you very much for all your contributions. But the point that you made about volunteering, because we're all volunteers on the festival, this festival, the Northern Ireland Mental Health Arts Festival, and lots of us are coming from a culture of volunteering over the years. And passion can only take you so far, in terms of your commitment or your dedication to anything. And you do need resources and you do need support. I suppose the key thing for us is the partnerships. We wouldn't be able to do our festival if we didn't have the partnerships. And it's not always about the money, it's about the relationships and the sense of connection. And the point that you were making earlier on, Andrew, you mentioned as well about, it's not even about the music. It's about that sense of connection. The music is nearly secondary. It's the discipline, the connection, the friendship and all of that. And when you talk there about accessing funds, structures, this whole thing about being able to validate what you do, because you know the value of it, you've seen it, you've experienced it, but sometimes to be validated by an organisation, because you have to jump through hoops to get the money, that can actually be a very cruel process, and sometimes you just think, well, I'm just going to do it without the money, I'm going to do it anyway. But then you can lose good people, because you can't sustain that level of commitment without that, with some sort of investment. And people sometimes will do things for free for so long, but there is something about actually the sense of reward, the sense of incentive, and the career career opportunities as well. So I think what you've said tonight, both in the first half and the second half, has given us a huge insight into what more we can do, because we feel like that within the arts. We feel like we're often seen as the poor relation, and we know that we have been supporting people stay well, get well, improve their health and well-being, improve their relationships. So in a sense, we are contributing to the health and well-being, because our hospitals, our health service can't cope. So what you're providing, you mentioned social work, your social workers, your mentors, your teachers, your role models, you know, it's much, much bigger than a band, you know. So I just want to congratulate you, and it's just a privilege to be here tonight. So thank you.
And I think it's about the acceptance. One of the big problems that we do have is we tend to think that the only people that can support us are arts and cultural stuff, where we should be looking at educational funding. We should be looking at health funding. You know, we should be looking at tying up with groups. You know, especially like around, say, victims and survivors and stuff. You know, we should be partnering up with those groups, and we should be looking at different areas. But the big problem, I think, is if we're trying to get over, and we're always trying to get over, Glenn touched on a lot of times, is the press and our country in general, our politicians, quite a lot of it, is so negative on the marching band scene that we find it very, very difficult to get into anything that's worthwhile. You know, I could tell you 100 stories about what we do well, but one story about what we don't do well clouds everything. You know, so there's a lot of avenues we should be exploring, but those doors are shut at this moment in time, and a lot is to do with negativity from our past, not to do with us.
Mine's is more of a comment and a suggestion. You were talking about the standard, or there's a kind of evolution that you're talking about, or wanting to go on, or some things being less, to try and get things less competitive, but still have that standard. And I wondered if you'd thought, or because you've obviously got processes in place of various different things, of a quality standard that bands can go through that is independently verified. I mean, a lot of I'm an artist, but I used to work in the Enterprise Centre, and we had to do a ISO quality standard thing, which was a pain. But what it did is it got an agreed standard for for the Enterprise Centre and all the processes and everything you had to do, and then there was a level that you had to have to start off, and then it was checked every year to see how you were improving or how it was going on in order to keep the standard. And everybody got really competitive in order to try and, you know, help improve and put resources in the areas where they were falling down, and, you know, in order to lift things up and stuff. So it's something, it sounds like you kind of have a lot of those things, but it's maybe not formalized, and somebody's in checking it.
Yeah, I think so.
I think we're very self-judging ourselves. Like nobody would be better on our band, anyway, that's for sure. So I don't really care what anybody else is on a level like that. There, you know, I think the competitiveness within bands is a really important thing, because it's, you know, it's what we are. You know, and areas, you know, it defines each area, and it defines us across the country too. You know, like we like the competitiveness, I think.
Sorry, the only other thing to note, just on, I think people forget as well, just to run a band and to keep a band on the road is so consuming in itself that it takes up so much of your time and resource and energy and passion and everything, that it's how you would find the time. So it all builds into the same.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe where the bonds forums, you know, can potentially provide some of that in regards to a structure and approach to that type of thing. I think would be really maybe something to look into in regards to what we do with that. But it may be along the lines of, you know, because one of the things that we've been thinking about here in work is we work in restorative justice, but we've been working with schools along the idea of being restorative ready. You know, are they, you know, capable, or do they have things in place that allow them to put into practice some of the things? I mean, maybe that's something that we could be looking into as well, you know, in terms of, are we, you know, mental health ready? Are we, you know, fitness ready? Or, you know, those type of things that are coming from other programs and stuff that we could be utilising and stuff as well. So, but folks, thank you very much. You know, it's been a reasonably long evening. Hope you've enjoyed it, and there's some hopefully you've gained some insights and stuff from, you know, what's been shared by the guys and stuff. I really appreciate it. I'm loving the fact that it's a small audience as well, because it feels a wee bit more intimate, you know, a wee bit more kind of like, it feels like, you know, something would happen in the bonds as well, you know, this kind of close-knit kind of thing that everybody being in together and stuff. But hopefully we'll be able to do more of these type of live events. In terms of tonight, folks, what I just like to say is it's been great to run this event. I know that, you know, maybe some of the technical things in this here haven't went my way. It's just, you know, it was sod's law that was going to be the case here. Because usually week in, week out, we run these podcasts and nothing happens. All right. And obviously we've now put on live events and stuff, and the gremlins have come in. So I'm going to refrain from making a joke there. All right. So I was going to say something that I might regret. But anyway, all right. But folks, all I want to say is thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time and effort to come down and spend a Monday night in this room and talking about bonds and specifically around mental health. And just to kind of give the podcast a wee bit of a plug as well, because one of the things that I found with the podcast for me is hearing people's stories, hearing the impact that, you know, the bonds have and just other things has had a massive impact on my life, even though I've been a member of bonds since I was 9 years old. Hearing other people's stories, hearing how they handle things, hearing how they do things, and then we've branched out a wee bit in terms of trying to make things a wee bit more edgy in terms of the things that we're talking about and stuff. People have really got into that, and I think it's one of the few, I think, mediums outside of bond parades being recorded and stuff that actually gives a voice to the bond members and the bond scene to share the positive aspect of what happens within the scene. I wish there was more. I wish there was more than one podcast. I wish there was more than one thing knocking about that was doing this type of stuff. And, you know, I think because there's the amount of stories that are out there, the amount of things that we cover in the bond scene is immense. So I just want to say thanks very much. And we'll be taking a wee bit of a break from podcasts for the next sort of, obviously with the time of year it is, you know, people will be out on parade rather than maybe sitting in the hang. But we've got a lot geared up for coming forward. Our 100th episode is coming up very, very soon. And we're hoping to have a massive live event for that there. We're hoping to have like Lisa Williams singing on a couple of bonds and stuff and all that. We're going to try and make a really big deal out of that. We're hoping to get Andy McAdam from the Black Skull for that there. We're hoping to get one of the guys from the Mail over for it as well, to have a real kind of massive, you know, celebration of, you know, what Made the Parade has been doing over the last sort of 3-4 years or whatever since the podcast started. Until the next one, folks, look after yourselves and take it easy. Good night.